Visualizing our best self redirects our attention away from the trigger and toward our values. This helps us to choose a helpful regulation strategy such as positive self-talk or reappraisal and then respond accordingly. Trigger regulation, positive self-talk. A lot of us, meaning you and your 30 personalities, but I didn't allow myself the pretty pleasure. Instead, I took myself out of the moment, visualized my best self as the feeling master, and the pause I started while formulating a reply. In that small window of time, I calmed myself, then made a commit without belittling her and move on. I'd love to connect with you later to hear your thoughts. I sighed. Nobody in that room knew how close I came in losing it. Truth is, a couple of years prior, I likely would have crumbled. The meta moment is not just for the down-regulating unpleasant emotions. Sometimes our best selves help us stand up for what's right. Once, during a speech, a colleague bullied me in an unusual way. He joked about my fact that I was bullied as a child. I hate to admit it, but my first impulse was to run on stage and deliver a flying three kick to his head. I regressed the feeling like a middle schooler being punished around in the locker room. But I took a meta moment and waited until after the presentation when I went up to him and said, I have no idea what motivated you to say those words, but it wasn't cool and you can't ever do it again. I count these as victories for the meta moment. How skilled are you taking in a meta moment? What adjectives characterize your best self? What are your go-to strategies when you're triggered and caught off guard? Do you ignore your feelings, act out, or meet them head-on? Or do you take in a deep breath, evoke your best self, think about the most effective strategy within a particular child, and calmly take action? Here are the steps to take so you can begin practicing the meta moment. 1. Sense the shift. You are activated, cut off the guard, or have an impulse to say or do something that you might regret. There is a shift in your thinking or physiology or both. Stop or pause. Create the space before you respond. Step back and breathe. Breathe again. See your best self. You imagine your best self. You think of objectives or even an image that helps your best self appear in a vivid detail. You might also think about your reputation. How do you want to be seen, talked about, and experienced? What would you do if someone you respect were watching? Strategize and act. You reach into your ruler toolkit, for instance, positive self-talk or reframing, and choose a path that will support you in closing the gap between your triggered self and your emerging best self. Always the last step. There are a few finer aspects of regulation we need to consider. Because emotion regulation requires brain power, moving from automatic and unhelpful to deliberate and helpful strategies is hard work. It depends on seemingly unrelated factors such as diet, exercise, and sleep. When you eat poorly, our minds don't function properly. Too much sugar and refined grain causes an blood glucose spike and then plummet, which affects cognitive function and self-control. especially around healthy eating. Easy solution. Make sure you have some healthy snacks in your desk at work, or set a reminder on your phone to ensure you nibble every 3 hours or so. Too little physical activity has a negative effect on our mental capacity and moods. In one study, subjects were exposed to the stressor, and then half of the participants did an aerobic exercise, while the others did not. The exercises reported feeling significantly less negative than the other group. Even anxiety and depression can be reduced by exercise. Accumulating research is showing how a regular yoga practice might be beneficial for both our mental and physical health. Poor quality or insufficient sleep has a similar effects on our emotions. When we are tired, our defenses are down, our ability to function mentally is low. Sleep serves as restorative function. When we don't get enough or we get too much, we show more symptoms of anxiety and depression, greater fatigue, and hostility. Inadequate sleep is associated with the reduced connections between brain regions responsible for cognitive control and behavior, and the use of effective emotion regulation strategies. There are two more measures we can take to safeguard our overall well-being. The first is by doing things we love, spending time with the family and friends, pursue passions and pastimes, get in touch with your spiritual side, immerse yourself in nature, read a good book, watch a funny movie. We build a cognitive resource that way, which will help us when emotional turmoil inevitably spikes. We are hardwired to seek social contact and support. People who lack it are prone to anxiety, depression, and cardiovascular disease. The second measure is to practice mindful breathing, which is perhaps the ultimate prevention strategy. As we've learned, daily practice enhances our ability to be present, accept the feelings as they come and go, and not be overly reactive and overwhelmed by them. Just take everything we know about how to maintain a good physical and mental health and apply it to your emotional fitness. It's all connected. With that, we've completed our education in the Pioneer Ruler skill, but we are not quite finished yet. Learning the 5 ruler skills and how and why they work is essential, but it's just the beginning of your education. Now comes the part where you put them all into good use. It's not so simple, learning 5 interrelated skills at once. Think about what it was like to learn any skill and not possess. For example, it took me 4 years and daily practice to get a black belt, and another 10 years to obtain a 5th grade and a black belt. Like learning a martial art, developing emotional skills and it takes time. It takes work. It takes practice. It takes openness to feedback. It takes a refinement. Owing to the emotional nature of these particular skills, you may find that you are better at some than others. It's certainly that way for me. I'm better at the thinking parts of a ruler than I am in putting them into action. Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. What's true is in a boxing ring isn't true everywhere else. Which is to say that from now on, we will master all our emotional responses until our significant other or cranky child or unreasonable boss triggers us with a word or look, and suddenly all the ruler training goes out the window. So, along with the permission to feel, we must also give ourselves a permission to fail. When that happens, we can only try again, take a deep breath or two, envision our best selves, and start over in the first hour. At such moments, we also need the courage and apologies for forgiveness ourselves as we forgive others. Courage can even mean seeking professional help when all else fails. We'll never stop having to work at being our best selves, but the payoff is worth it. Better health, decision making, relationships, better everything. Of course, all the emotional mastery in the world won't help much if everyone else is still playing by bad old rules of engagement. As Uncle Marvin discovered decades ago, it's not enough to teach these skills in school children. Their teachers must also become emotion scientists, and their parents too, and everyone else with an influence over their lives, including employers and work colleagues, which is what the next session is all about. Applying emotional skills for optimal well-being and success. Emotions at home. We all arrive in this world programmed differently where emotions are connected. Each of us has a different threshold for being provoked, activated, aroused, or startled. Some of us experience it feeling more intensely than others. We recover from emotional reactions at different speeds. But these individual differences don't determine whether we will develop emotional skills. Research shows that even highly reactive kids who are raised in nurturing families can turn out just fine. There's the home where we grew up, where our emotional lives were formed. We are not born with emotional knowledge. We mostly respond to stimuli. We are hungry, we are cold, we are uncomfortable when in one person or another, and so we react. Nature provides that response to make sure we get the attention we need to survive infancy. Everything beyond that is learned in the nest. We carry those emotional patterns forward with us, the good and the bad, often replicating them. And in our new home, the cycle repeats, built on the emotional foundations of one where we started out. Given this, what steps can we take to create healthy home environments, places where our children and loved ones will feel supported, valued, treasured, and understood and heard? Homes are filled with patience and acceptance and humor and joy. Few parents today would argue with the idea that their children will do best if they are well loved. That wasn't always so. Early in the 20th century, the fields of child psychology and development were divided over how best to raise children, especially on the merits and the strictness or leniency, discipline or tenderness. The president of the American Psychological Association, John B. Watson, warned in 1915 that too much love and comforting was dangerous for children, and that their lives would be spoiled by coddling. What does parents miss? And the focus on emotional skill is about real, practical skills. Permission to feel doesn't mean obsessing over every time somebody is mean to us or ignores us. It's really just an opposite. Teaching our ability to get through those moments, to learn from them, and to continue to function normally. Emotional skills are the bulwark against an epidemic of anger, bullying, disengagement, anxiety, and dread in the country, especially among young people. They clear away the most persistent drag on our creativity, relationships, and decisions and health. Permission to feel strengthens. It's not always easy to face the truth about who we are and to recon with our own and our children's emotional lives. But it is a whole lot better than the alternative. denial, overreacting, and so on. You teach your children to express their emotions by skillfully expressing yours. Conversely, if you are reluctant to express your feelings or do so only screamingly, in a few words and impossible, then that's what your children will learn to do when they grow up. This is why we adults need to be open to learning and practicing strategies in our own emotional lives before we can support our kids. Beliefs and around feelings. Family researchers such as John Gottman and the developmental psychologists such as Amy Halbershaw have shown that parents who value emotions tend to be aware of their children's feelings and are able to act like coaches. They don't respond with an aggression of discipline when their kids express anger or sadness. Instead, they see strong feelings as an essential part of a healthy development. Parents who view emotions as harmful or disruptive are the ones who command. Their children start to suck it up and see their kids' emotional expressions as manipulative. Those are the same parents who mask their own emotions and send their implicit messages that feelings are unimportant. Even when we do acknowledge others' emotions, we have to be careful about how we do so. Boys and girls often receive different messages about emotions from parents, and these gender differences tend to increase with age. Most of us are unaware of how important vocabulary is to emotion skills. As we've seen, using many different words implies valuable distinctions, but we are not always simply angry that, but rather sometimes annoyed, irritated, frustrated, disgusted, aggravated, and so on. If we can discern the difference, it suggests that we can understand it either. It's the difference between a rich emotional life and an impoverished one. Your child will inherit the one you provided. In one study, researchers found that mothers who use a more sophisticated language when talking about the feelings and children who were better at regulating their own emotions. The authors wrote, the ability to talk about one's own affective state has its most obvious importance for regulating affect, and each part enlists others as source of aid or comfort. What that means, essentially, is that if mothers and fathers use many words to describe emotions rather than just a few basic ones, their children will be better able to express their feelings to others. They will also be more empathetic. More hours of screen times are associated with the lower well-being in children and adolescents. That higher users show less curiosity, self-control, and emotional stability, and that twice as many high versus low users of screens are diagnosed with anxiety or depression. The top negative responses: stuck, heavy, toxic, suppressed, inconvenient, stunted, avoidant, blind, intense, and unsupportive. The top positive answers: supportive, loving, caring, nurturing, and accepting. Given our natural bias to remember negative events better than positive ones, I often think back to the bullying and abuse I suffered in elementary and middle school. One of my strongest memories of the childhood was when my parents made me run around the block on Christmas Eve before they would let me open presents. Somehow, they believed that was an effective strategy to help me to lose weight. But I also had other happy experiences, such as studying martial arts and earning my black belt, my girlfriend and best friend from high school, spending time with Uncle Marvin. Those were the great times and that brought me joy. Ultimately, it was in both the positive and the negative experiences that led me dedicate my life to help others and find the permission to feel and to express what they are feeling without the shame or fear. Hmm. But the trigger is inside us, not out there. We have to take responsibility for our actions rather than shift the blame elsewhere. It may not have felt like a choice, but it surely was. We decide how we'll respond to life's inner provocations. Don't want to exploit and rage every time the kid is disrespectful. Come up with a better way to respond. Clearly, the old say, matching nastiness for nastiness and it wasn't working. So, what does work? This brings us back to the final art of ruler regulation of our own emotional responses and those of our children too. The first is of regulation, the single most powerful force in our wrestle is a meta moment. The pause for the breath or two when we are about to react in a way that we really rather avoid. Pausing to breathe when challenge is an ancient technique for the mastering our responses to life. But that's just where the emotional regulation process begins. A breeze can deactivate a strong reaction and require a second or two to think. But the full meta moment is key. Something we call your best self. We may not be their best self all of the time. We may not even get a close most of the time. But it's important to know that person will. Is the one you aspire to be. If during the meta moment we ask ourselves, how will my best self respond? Here's another way of approaching the idea of your best self in the world, at your workplace, in your community. Wherever you are not, you have a reputation. If you like most people, you take it seriously and do your best and maintain it. You have the reputation of being kind and patient, or understanding, or forgiving, or the opposite of those qualities, or somewhere in between. You're known for being quick or slow to anger, easy and hard to talk to, honest and sincere, and snarky and sarcastic. You're famous for keeping your promises and forgetting them, for being generous or selfish. You earned your reputation at home the same way you didn't everywhere else by your actions. So, what's your reputation at home? And what did you do or fail to do to deserve it? Thinking about our reputation makes us behave in ways that cause people to admire and respect us. But all these strategies will work only after we've been taken as a meta moment. It has to become almost the second nature. How long would it take for that to happen? More than a day or two? More than a week or a month? If you try hard and apply yourself and hit the pause button and formulate your responses to whatever just triggered you. Maybe in 6 months it will begin to feel like a habit. It's unrealistic to think the meta moment is going to become automatic overnight. I spend most of my life researching and teaching and discussing emotion skills and the meta moment as a total emotionally intelligent person. Yet after a long day of work, when I get home, tired and hungry, and brain dead, even my skills and sometimes go out the window. You can boil the entire process and bring emotional intelligence into your family down to 4 steps. 1. Set yourself up for success. 2. Explore. And 3. Strategize. Or follow up. Here's a good example of the process of my own life. I have a niece, Esun, who was adopted from Guatemala as a baby by my cousin Alvin. Often, we are under psychological assault. Our default position is surrender. We accept that this negative view of us and it must be true, and we adopt it as our own. Children do not have the inner strength or knowledge of other people and their motivations to be able to say, "Who are you to define me? What gives you right? Why do you need to belittle me? I respect you and the judgment of me. I know who I am." They need our unconditional adult support. As I've said before, the permission to feel begins with a question that Uncle Marvin had the courage to ask me. How are you feeling? Likewise, its denial begins with a failure to ask it. When our children don't have the permission to feel, they still will. But those feeling wasn't going in the dark, and the pathways in between those feelings and their visible manifestations and behaviors will become almost totally obscure. Not only will our children suffer, we'll also have no idea why. I doubt that scenario sounds unfamiliar. However, when we support our children to their full feeling selves, we will see how deeply and enduring they can flourish. And it starts with us as another role models.